Tervetuloa. Welcome to our official residence in New York, my home. My name is Mika Koskinen. I'm the Consul General of Finland. The residence of Finland in New York has been located here in Manhattan's Upper East Side, overlooking Central Park, since 1965. Annually, the residence brings together key decision and tastemakers in business, culture, politics, and media in dozens of receptions, lunches, dinners, roundtables, salons, and more. Finland has been selected as the happiest country in the world for several years in a row. For us Finns, the home is one of the key sources of our happiness. Here in my home, the materials, shapes, and forms of our everlasting Finnish design turn the place into a healing retreat, helping me and my family focus and relax. Design items have been essential in building our national cultural heritage. Take, for example, this 100-year-old dining table by architect and designer Eero Saarinen. Finnish design is also constantly evolving, in sync with nature and technology. In Finland, design is a state of mind, and it is woven seamlessly into everyday life. It is about finding beauty in simplicity and enhancing everyday rituals with well-crafted objects and a deep connection to the living world. In the words of architect Alvar Aalto, nothing old is ever reborn, but neither does it totally disappear. And that which has been once born will always reappear in a new form. The residence is also a home away from home to Finland's vibrant visual art scene. The artworks on display are by Finnish artists based in New York, from local galleries and from the collections of Kiasma, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Helsinki. Welcome to Finland.
Design Diplomacy is a series of conversation events that take place in diplomatic residencies all around the world. Two designers get together and have this deck of cards in which playful yet intelligent questions challenge the players as well as the audience to consider design as a form of intercultural exchange. How it works is that we build international links for diplomatic representations, design professionals, as well as audiences. The Design Diplomacy was created by Helsinki Design Week. That was 5 years ago, and ever since then, we've played Design Diplomacy card games in over 20 residencies around Helsinki every year in September. Additionally, these conversation events have taken place in Reykjavik, Tokyo, in New York, in Madrid, Oslo, Berlin, as well as Canberra. We at Helsinki Design Week and in Weekly, we believe in international cooperation and in the possibility to change the world through meaningful encounters and interactions. Sometimes all you need is a deck of cards. Incidentally, the word diploma derives from a Greek word that means a paper folded in two.
Welcome to Finland's residence in New York and my home. My name is Mika Koskinen and I am the Consul General of Finland here in New York. Thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited to be hosting this virtual salon by Finland in the conversation series Nordic Design Diplomacy in New York, as a part of New York by Design's Design Days experience. I have invited two players, both absolutely wonderful design professionals, Debbie Millman and Teemu Suviala, to join me in a game of cards and to discuss all things in the wondrous world of design. With the guidance of this deck of cards right here, we will be playfully exploring the players' experiences, inspirations, and perspectives in their remarkable career in design and life in general. Before I start dealing the cards, let me welcome and introduce our players. Debbie Millman, named one of the most creative people in business by Fast Company, and one of the most influential designers working today by Graphic Design USA. Debbie Millman is also an author, educator, curator, and host of the podcast Design Matters, one of the world's first and longest running podcasts. Debbie is author of 6 books, including 2 collections of interviews that have extended the ethos and editorial vision of Design Matters to the printed page. How to think like a great graphic designer, and brand thinking and other noble pursuits. In 2009, Debbie co-founded with Stephen Heller the world's first graduate program in branding at School of Visual Arts in New York City. Debbie's illustrations have appeared in publications such as the New York Times, New York Magazine, Print Magazine, Design Observer, and Fast Company. Debbie is also President Emeritus of AIGA, one of the 5 women to hold the position in the organization's 100-year history. She is a frequent speaker on design and branding in multiple universities, festivals, and events around the world. Teemu Suviala is the head of brand design at Facebook Reality Labs. This diverse group of problem solvers, inventors, and visionaries leads the expansive work being done at Facebook in building the next computing platform to help people feel connected anytime and anywhere. Facebook Reality Labs work in augmented and virtual reality includes a number of breakthrough technologies, with brands such as Oculus, Portal, and Spark AR, and touches industries ranging from entertainment and gaming to education and beyond. Before joining Facebook, Teemu led creative work at brand and design agencies Collins and Wolf Olins in New York. He is also known as the co-founder of design agency Kokoro and Moi. Teemu was awarded as Graphia's Graphic Designer of the Year in 2012 and Design Forum's Finland's Young Designer of the Year in 2005, alongside his partner Antti Hinkula. So let the game begin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First question, did you choose your profession or did it choose you?
It definitely chose me. It was not something I even knew existed until my senior year of college.
And how about Teemu?
Yeah, I think definitely the same thing. I don't think I knew what I was, maybe I don't even know what I'm doing still. And I'm on this journey figuring out like what is design and what can I do with it. But it's been a journey. It started with cartoons, and I thought I'm going to be an illustrator, and then I learned about graphic design, and it became a kind of a larger thing. And definitely chose me as well.
That's been a wonderful journey for both of you. Second one to Teemu. Is there something you dislike in the design field?
I'm a born optimist. I always try to see like what is so great and what can be built upon. I know in every discipline, every profession, there's room for improvement, and sometimes it comes from within, or sometimes it can be a force that comes outside. Like now during pandemic, I think it has put a lot of values and like what are we really focusing on to a new perspective. So that's kind of like what I'm being optimistic about. You know, the profession, the field will get more interesting and more meaningful to people who are either in a design profession or are in the other end, being helped through design.
Thank you. Next question for Debbie. Give a piece of advice you wish someone had told you.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I have so many. One good one. One piece of advice I wish someone had. Okay, I wish that someone would have told me that anything worthwhile takes a long time. I was looking for instant everything, instant success, instant love, instant greatness, and it all takes a really long time.
Thank you, Debbie. Following question for Teemu. If you were choosing your field now, would you choose to become a designer?
I think it's maybe related to the last question around, and maybe I'm kind of answering both of them here. If I go back to question about a piece of advice, I hope that someone should have or could have told me that things are going to be changing. It's not going to be linear. There's not going to be a career path, and it's going to be looping moments that are then connected somehow, and you'll understand it only later when you look back at your career that, oh, actually this made sense because now they kind of build the character and the creative who I am. So and then going back to the second question is I don't know if I would have the opportunity to make that decision, as if I believe in the power of the universe and things changing and you needing to be in that flow. And maybe a couple more words about changes and why I feel it's important for us designers to think about that. I know, Debbie, you have a class or a course around designing your life.
It's for undergrads to help them get a job. So it's called Differentiate or Die, how to get a job when you graduate. And then I have another one for the grads. It's called A Brand Called You, but essentially they're the same.
Yeah, that's what I remember hearing. I think there's something about in kind of building yourself as a designer, how to build resilience in your persona and character so you can go through all those changes that come your way. And I always go back to people like Malcolm McLaren and David Bowie, how resilient they were, and they were kind of moving together with the culture, partly pushing the culture, coming up with new things, introducing punk music or voguing or hip hop or going through different characters and all that. So there's something in just looking at how creatives in other fields have built their careers that's not linear, and we should somehow embrace change more. And that's why I've been reading on things like this is the I Ching, the book of changes, which a lot of creatives during years have used as this opportunity to celebrate randomness and kind of specific moments in time, and then build on that, like John Cage and George Harrison. So I know this is a long ramble about these two questions, but I think there's something I hope someone who would have taught me about embracing change, and then because if it's about changes, I can't really, and I shouldn't be worried about what I'm choosing. I should just go with the flow.
Teemu, one question more in this field, that design is changing all the time. The future of design could be also immaterial. Currently, we are designing, for example, concepts, processes, services, and cities. How do you see the future of design?
Oh, that's a big one. I think going back to talking about this year and how it has impacted and what designers have been creating throughout the pandemic and programs that people like Paula Antonelli and Alice Rosthern have put together around designing for better world and designing for better life. I think there's something that is really true. I don't know if we need, more new material products. It should be about, society and our connections, and I don't know how to build more understanding between different people and embrace empathy. And I wonder if design has more to do in there.
Great. And Debbie, how do you feel about this?
Well, I think that we're seeing a time where design is becoming more and more democratized. When we first used or started using symbols, when we started creating telegraphic symbols to communicate our ideas and beliefs, it was all done for the ability to communicate what we thought, to create consensus, to build safety and security among groups. And this began in our history as humans about 10,000 years ago, maybe more. And so it's only in the last 200 or so that that same way of telegraphing ideals was appropriated by the corporation, who then began to use those same tenets of design and branding to communicate attributes about products so that they could sell them to people and have recognition. And that's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just the way it's all unfolded. It's only in the last 10 years or so that humans, people, have taken back quite a lot of that power and have used, again, those same tenets of communication to create movements, to create global movements. You know, back in the civil rights movement, I was talking to a family member of mine who teaches a class on the ideals of movements, of human and civil rights movements. And, you know, 50 years ago, they were mimeographing 8.5 by 11 posters, and they would have to distribute them and gain consensus and community and power in numbers through word of mouth and through handing out flyers. All we need today is a hashtag. And so I think that our ability to begin to design and create the kind of world we want to live in has become more democratized, and I think as a result has become better.
Certainly. One more question to Debbie. Do you prefer to work alone or together?
I would say both. I like to collaborate with people. I like to work on teams. I like to build ideas with others. But I also love to interview other people, so that can't be done solo. But all the work that I do to prepare for interviews for Design Matters, or any of my writing or illustration work, I prefer to be alone to do. So I get great joy and a tremendous amount of recharge working on my own. And then I also get a great sense of community and comradeship with working with others.
Thank you, Debbie. And a question for Teemu. Give a concrete example of how design has made the world better.
Yeah, first thought that came to my mind was some of the innovations around cleaning up the oceans, projects started by young students that have then gained traction and investment. So projects that are fairly tactile and practical in actually doing good. But I think there's also something brewing underneath as well, like these kind of bigger changes in society, which are also like certainly designed by policymakers and more like more creatives. And we have like chief design officers in city government as well. And I think some of the places where design will have a huge impact in making life better is maybe there, like in kind of policy level. And I'm kind of optimistic about that as well.
Teemu, do you have this in your mind when you create something new, make the world better?
Yeah, always. It's well, first of all, you shouldn't be creating anything that's making things worse. And that's kind of why the first classes that we took when starting in design school back in Finland is like, there's like reading Victor Papanek and those guys around like what is needed in the in the world and what we shouldn't be doing. So I think there has to be that thought that goes through all the work. Sometimes you can have like larger impact, and sometimes the impact can be smaller and or different. Like sometimes you just need to bring joy to the world, and that can be a simple gesture, a visual gesture, whether it's a poster or a digital thing that is shared. But like I think rather than always trying to have a huge change in the world might be too big of a thing to go after all the time. It needs to be a in your DNA and a through line that it just like scales from a smaller improvement to larger improvement.
Thank you, Teemu. And a question for Debbie. Which of your tasks would you happily let a robot do?
Billing. Yeah, I think that I do a lot more administrative stuff than I really should, mostly because I don't want to have to ask anybody to do anything. So I think that I'd love to give up more of the less creative aspects of what I have to do.
Administrative work, certainly. Teemu, what do you wish you had designed yourself?
A great question. And I think there might be a reason why I don't have an answer to that. And maybe it's because I'm maybe looking more towards the future, what can be designed in the future, rather than looking to the past, what has been designed. But yeah, what I'm proud of, like if being a Nordic, a Finn, I'm proud of like again going back to the welfare system and the society, like the people who kind of build all that, like after the wars, especially like how Finland was able to go from extreme like people being extreme poor to something that we actually are thriving these days. Like that's a huge accomplishment, and it's not a really design accomplishment, although designers were influential in the 50s and 60s to kind of bring Finland to the world stage and winning all those like record number of medals in triennales and through architecture and design. So they were like maybe that could have been great to be part of that group, like building the future for Finland. But I think I'm doing that now in some sense. Or maybe someone in the future can look back like, maybe Teemu helped on a little thing here. Hopefully.
You're absolutely right, Teemu. Debbie, has your parents' taste affected you?
Well, my dad was a pharmacist, and he had his own business for my whole life. He passed away 6 years ago, but I think that it's not so much his taste that impacted me or affected me. It was more his work ethic. He was a very hard worker, and so that was something I recognized at a very young age was the way to live one's life. And he also, because he was a pharmacist, but also ran his own business and was one of the few remaining mom and pop type pharmacists before he died, I watched his ability to grow as an entrepreneur be a part of how he grew his business. So that was also really interesting to see. And that I think it influenced my work ethic. It also influenced my independence and wanting to remain as independent as possible. And my mother was a seamstress for a living, but also was an artist. And so she taught me how to draw. She taught me how to sew. I definitely picked up her artistic genes, so I got lucky in that regard. So between the two of them, it sort of makes sense that I'd be a commercial artist, given my dad's sort of business side and my mom's artistic side.
I think that's super interesting when I think about like we are these kind of combinations of people in the past, and I feel like my dad was a lawyer, retired now. Definitely work ethic coming from there, and then getting kind of the empathy and care from my mom. But then I had an uncle who was really creative, and he was one of the first Finnish recording rock and roll musicians who did some songs back in the 50s, and then he was great in drawing. So I remember sitting with him in my grandma's place, and he was drawing these characters, and that got me into a drawing and comics, and then he had like such a great style, and still has. He's probably hitting his 80s, but he just like wears amazing clothing and does exactly what he wants and doesn't care what other people think. He goes to a belly dancing class, and everyone else is a female, and he's doing it. And there's this is a fun Finnish story, but it was same class with the then president of Finland, Tarja Halonen. Like, she was in the same class. That's kind of like tells like something about the society as well, like how you can attend a belly dancing class with the president. But yeah, like getting these kind of inspirations and then motivation from your family and the people around you when you're a kid, like it's only now dawning to me like how important that has been.
Yeah.
Wonderful memories, both of you. A question for Teemu. Complete the sentence. The biggest challenge in my career. What would it be?
The biggest challenge in my career is to balance work and life.
What about you, Debbie?
The biggest challenge in my career has been myself.
Thank you both. Debbie, what is the role of design in your home country?
That depends a lot on where you are. I think that the really interesting thing about the United States is that we are 50 states and also some territories, and each place has its own visual language, its own vernacular. And so what might seem absolutely appropriate in a place like Hawaii is completely inappropriate in a place like Alaska. So because the terrains are so different, because there's such a variety of weather, because there is such a variety of temperature shifts, I think that all of those things impact the way we design housing, the way we design clothing, the way we design the way we accessorize our cars. So I think that it's a country of a lot of blended visual styles, a lot of blended rituals, a lot of blended preconceived notions about what is and isn't acceptable. That's being challenged now quite a bit. And I think it's also a place of great innovation because so much work still needs to be done. So I don't know that I could specifically say this is the definition of design in the United States. I would say that if you asked the 350 million people that live here, you'd probably get 350 million definitions.
You certainly do. What about you, Teemu, and Finland?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Finland definitely is more monolithic when it comes to design, and you go to any home in Finland, you find the same Iittala objects or Marimekko textiles, and it's really like embedded in culture in many different ways, from homeware to public transport and school system, like if you want to stretch that far. So yeah, I think that there's good and bad qualities in having that sort of a monolithic culture. Like, I know there's like more diversity today than there was like 50 years ago, but there is a DNA there that is kind of rooted in the people and the nature. And I think those two things are like kind of big accomplishments themselves to be the foundation for a lot of the design. So everything is kind of really around those two in many cases and in the best cases.
Thank you, Teemu. Debbie, Which book should every designer read?
That's a great question.
You have many books as well.
I'm not going to include mine. Boy, this is such a tough question. One design book that everybody should read. Wow.
Does it have to be a design book? Can it be something?
I would say Eric Spiekerman's Stop Being Sheep.
Why, Debbie?
Because he gives really good advice about typography, life, communication, and design in a very Eric Spiekerman way.
Thank you, Debbie. What about Teemu? Do you have any?
I think I was promoting a couple of books here already. The Victor Papanek book and then I Ching. But as a literature in general, like one thing that I recommend reading is kind of the recent research and writings around quantum mechanics. Like that has been like really eye-opening for me because it's made me feel very small, which is amazing because I don't have to be. I like it's kind of puts things in perspective when you start thinking about, oh, are there other universes, or like what are the many worlds that could happen from this specific moment. So just as a from putting things in perspective point of view, like that's what I would recommend, because I know what designers can get like really big with
really
our
myopic.
Yeah, I think that we have the power and the biggest impact, but yeah, that's just like at least has grounded me. And maybe it's not the book that or those books are not the ones that you should read first, maybe later. So maybe there's a curriculum in our career where a certain book should be inserted at certain times. Maybe there's a interesting project for someone to do.
Well, I think if anybody were to be getting started with that type of reading list, having A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking on it, having The Elegant Universe by Brian Greene, I mean, there's so many great places to start to really begin to understand what we're made of. Yeah, so fascinating, endlessly fascinated by it.
Yeah, we're all made out of stars.
Yeah.
And yeah, like it's like there can be some inspirational things just to design itself, like how to design for the future. Well, in my work, like we've been talking about the new places where you could go, like metaverse and other realities. So it's like maybe that's why it has been top of mind for me lately as well.
Yeah. I think about it a lot too.
Thank you. A new question for Teemu. What is your utopia?
Well, I think I talk about empathy and understanding here. Like I think that's my utopia. And I hope it's not a utopia, it's future. Yeah, that's kind of having more understanding between each other, knowing that we are on this one planet, small planet in the universe together, and we need to find ways to solve challenges together and see opportunities in those challenges rather than being stuck in the past or fighting over smallish things when we look at the larger perspective. So that's kind of my utopia around empathy and understanding, more of that.
Thank you, Teemu. Maybe one question more. How should foresight be linked to the design process when we speak about the future?
Oh, it's like fundamental piece in it. Like that's foundational. That's where it should start from. And foresight is partly it's looking back as well. Okay. So you need to know history, where things are coming from. You need to know what's happening today, like what motivates people and how why certain things are happening right now. And then there are tools to have foresight to the future as well. Like, you know, trajectory of technology, you know what type of things are coming in the next 5 to 10 years, maybe even 30 years, like how energy will be provided and all that. And then kind of summing all that together, the past, the present, and the future. And then you have foresight that should be kind of at the starting point for your design design adventures.
Thank you, Teemu. Really, really interesting. Debbie, what has been your favorite project?
My favorite project, I would say my favorite project has been working with Mariska Hargitay. She is the star of Law and Order SVU. And she has been the star of that show for 22 years. It's the longest running drama in television history. And about 15 years ago, she, after getting so many letters from so many people writing to her about the show, about the topic matter, and how much hearing her point of view and representing special victims on the show was beneficial to them, she decided to start a foundation to eradicate sexual violence in our culture. And for the last, I would say 10 or so years, I've been working with her to help do that. And so I feel like that gives my life meaning. It gives me a sense of purpose. It helps my life make sense in a lot of ways. And I feel like I'm trying, or I'm contributing to making the world a safer place.
Thank you, Debbie. Teemu, why is it important to talk about design?
Well, I think it goes back to what Debbie was saying about design being democratized these days, and everyone has an access, and when everyone has access to that, they have opportunity to influence things. So therefore, educating larger audiences about what design is and what you can do with it is important. So yeah, that's my reply.
Maybe one additional question, Teemu. Design awards and mutual praise is very common in the design field. Do we have enough critical analysis of design?
Oh, great one. I don't think so. Like I've been a big fan of publications like Design Observer, like how that was the place for really critical dialogue and conversation. And I think I was listening a podcast where Adrian Shaughnessy was being interviewed. He talked about this thing. I think it was him or Michael Beirut. And then when we got into the advent of social media, that kind of dispersed like all that critical discourse to all these like little pockets. So maybe the critical discussion exists, but it's just like in these kind of hidden nooks and crooks like around the mainly digital platform. So I wonder if there were more forces that could bring that dialogue back together. And maybe it's happening at events and festivals, but I wonder if it still keeps things too small, especially again thinking about like how widely spread design is these days, like how we could, I don't know, it's linked back to education, like the critical discourse and education, like how that could be shared with a larger group of people. I wonder, like Debbie, like you probably have like a good point of view as an educator.
How do you feel about this, Debbie?
Well, I agree. I think that there was a time maybe between 2003 and 2010 where there was a lot of really vibrant discourse online. Suddenly, in real time, people were arguing about the latest logo or the latest redesign. I think that that's still happening, but it's much more diluted. People aren't only going to one or two places the way they did back in 2003, 2004, 2005, when Speak Up first started and when Design Observer first started. I'm really nostalgic for those spaces because it did feel like everybody there knew your name and you could have a conversation that was critical without being disrespectful. And that's changed a lot online. Now everything's so polarized that it's hard to share discourse in a way that feels like you could be learning or growing or even changing your mind. And that's something I think that's really important. We tend to now go to these echo chambers where we are surrounded by like-minded people that think like-minded thoughts. And while that might make us feel more secure or more comfortable, it doesn't really allow for that intellectual growth that Teemu is talking about. And I do think that we're likely going to see the emergence of some new technology that helps facilitate that.
Yeah, and to build upon that, discourse is always challenging. Like it's not easy, and we're in the world where a lot of our interactions are actually broadcasting. Like we're just like pushing messages out and seeing what sticks, rather than going into these kind of lengthy conversations around subject. Like it's harder, and it requires more from like time wise, and like it requires more of thought, so energy and thinking. So I wonder if this time, like there's something in this time that it doesn't really fit into a lot of the trends that are up in the air. But yeah, I'm also kind of a nostalgic, but I think it's something that's kind of rooted in how we as not just creatives, but as human beings have been gathering together and discussed about things, and like going back to, like you could go back to I don't know, ancient Greek or even before that, like when people were getting together around a fire and passed information and rituals and talk about things that need to be figured out. But yeah, I agree with Debbie. Like, there's probably something that it's just about to come. Like, it's going to happen. It's so rooted in us as human beings.
And to build on what Teemu was just saying, millennia ago, when we were sitting around the campfire, we were using the very same tenets of branding and design that we use now to signify the tribes that we belonged to signify where we belonged. We used makeup to be more beautiful to God. We made flags to signify where on battlefields we should go, because there were no mass manufactured uniforms at that time. We used crests to signify where we belonged family-wise. And we created symbols all over the world. No matter how far away we were, we all created symbols to signify, to represent our belief in a higher power. And so, people talk about how interesting it is that fashion tends to follow trends and fads without editors necessarily speaking to each other. Why does everybody choose a specific color or a specific heel or a specific length of skirt? Well, here we were all over the globe 10,000, 15,000 years ago. And no matter how far away we were from each other, we created symbols to signify what our belief with that higher power was. And we do the same thing now with sneakers and with shoes and devices. Those have symbols on them too, and they're all made in the same way. So we're just a creature of habit and ritual, just doing it in more sophisticated ways.
Thank you so much. One question more for Debbie. If we asked your first boss to describe you, what would she or he say?
Wow, that's a great question. I have different kinds of bosses. So I have a boss from a mascara factory that I worked in, where I was putting together mascara brushes, and I had to put together a certain number of brushes per hour together. I think that she would probably say that I was too slow. Then, my dad was my boss for a while when I worked in his pharmacy, and he'd probably say I talked too much to the customers. And then I think that in the pizza place that I worked in college, where I was making pizza and falafel, I think that my boss would say I gave away too much free food. And then I think that my first boss in my first real job in New York would say I was a young woman with a lot of determination that showed a lot of promise, but had really bad typographic chops.
Thank you, Debbie. What about you, Teemu?
Yeah, I was just thinking like who has been my first boss? Probably like the summer jobs when I had like early teens. They probably would have said like you're trying too much. Like you don't. Like I was working around. We were casting cement to to some sort of like grounding systems and taking care of soccer fields. And yeah, I've been always overachiever, and maybe I was overachieving in trying to make the soccer fields look beautiful. I can't control everything, and yeah, I think that's the advice that I got.
Thank you so much. Teemu, what are you currently working on?
Yeah, I'm working on kind of the future of computing, thinking like what are the next platforms where we can come together and connect anytime and from anywhere. So that's through virtual reality, augmented reality, and things related to that. So it is not something that I was trained for. It's something that I've been doing only for the last few years, and using my skills as a designer to have or bring a point of view and help wherever I can. And I think like I could be working on kind of like any other area as well, and I would use the same tools. So that's been great to understand that you don't have to really work on one specific field when you kind of like think that you have the tools somewhat in control and can utilize them in different places. So I'm working on those specific things: virtual reality, augmented reality, and branding and design around them. But in the core, I'm still working on branding and graphic design, and that's kind of like the core for a lot of different things that I'm doing. It just has expanded to spatial design and thinking about audio and interaction, but it's coming back down to, Debbie was talking about symbols, and it's really kind of like going back to that core. So partly bringing something from the past and then using it for future things.
Thank you, Teemu. Debbie, describe the aesthetics in the USA.
Red, white, and blue, big, gaudy, and overstuffed. Black, white, yellow, red, brown. And a lot of push and pull.
Thank you, Debbie. And the last question for both of you. What keeps you up at night?
Well, for me, the last couple of months, the photo permissions I need from photographers for my upcoming book, which is due at the printer in a couple of minutes and is coming out in October. And it's been a really intense project and process that has been keeping me up many, many, many nights, worrying about getting everything done and wondering if I'm going to get every photographer to give me permission to publish the photographs of great artists and designers and makers and thinkers in this book that I've spent the last 3 years of my life working on. That keeps me up at night on a personal level, and on a much sort of bigger world level. I think about how much plastic are we breathing in, and are we going to keep the planet alive given our bad behavior? And going back just to make it a really symmetrical conversation to what Teemu was talking about, are we alone in the universe? Is it a multiverse? What are we made of? How did we get here? Where are we going?
Thank you, Debbie. And you, Teemu?
In a very tactical level, excitement is really keeping me up at night. I have a bad habit of waking up way too early. I usually wake up around 4, and then it's the worst time to wake up because it's like too early to get up, but it can be too late to actually get back to it. And I feel it's coming from kind of being overloaded by new things and things that are going on. So that's kind of a very tactical thing, what is actually really keeping me up at night or early hours. But yeah, to me, it's like the polarization that I see happening many different places, not just in US, in Europe as well, Australia. I think it's like a bigger challenge that we actually think, because we always look at it from national level, like what's happening in US or what's happening in Finland, but I haven't even seen like too much of like EU level. Like, do we like maybe those discussions happen in many different places that just don't have the visibility. But yeah, that's kind of a polarization in general, and us not meeting each other eye to eye and finding each other and understanding.
So thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I think we had a great conversation.
Really fun. Thank you.
Thank you both, Debbie and Teemu, for this really inspiring conversation. And thank you to our audience for tuning in and joining us today. Please remember to watch the other virtual salons in this conversation series hosted by our fellow Nordic consulates in New York, Denmark, Iceland, Norway, and Sweden. Kiitos, thank you, and hope to see you soon.